This week, Wakanda Forever. Genius movie or giant bomb? Let's find out. The Nerd Byword starts now. Ladies and gentle nerds, welcome to episode 132 of the Nerd Byword podcast. And in this week's episode, Kris and I sit down with creator and host of X of Words to go do a deep dive into Wakanda Forever. But before we get to this week's big talk, it is time as always for... All right, Kris, looks to me like you got some sad news that we need to discuss this week.
Yeah, Dave, it feels as though we were reporting on news stories like this all too often, unfortunately, in the nerd world. But we have lost another icon recently in Jason David Frank, who is perhaps best known for his role as Tommy Oliver in multiple iterations of the Power Rangers franchise. Tommy burst onto the scene in 1993 and instantly became, everyone's favorite Power Ranger. His charisma, his charm, his overall swagger were undeniable. His passion for the franchise, lasted decades and decades, and he truly, truly loved this and embraced it. In a world where so many actors are ashamed of the things that made them famous, or they get exhausted or jaded by it, that is very much not the case with Jason David Frank. As touching tributes from fans and fellow cast members alike have poured in over the past few days, one thing stands out. Frank was immensely passionate about his work and his art and truly appreciated his fans. May he rest in peace and comfort and love and strength to those close to him. Particular love to his widow, who has unfortunately been harassed by a bunch of idiots online, as is all too often the case. And if you are targeting this woman who has just lost her husband, you are the saddest sack of that I have ever seen. And let her grieve in peace.
Yeah, I mean, this one, much like the passing of Batman himself very recently, this has been a difficult blow to the childhood of nerds everywhere. Jason David Frank, obviously, his Power Rangers involvement is sort of his main calling card. I don't even know how to describe my obsession as a child with Power Rangers. There for a while, it almost reached TMNT levels of absolute obsessiveness. I had all the toys. I watched every episode, and I think the thing that actually cemented to me my love of Power Rangers was that 5-parter. In Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, when the Green Ranger was introduced first as a villain and then was eventually turned and joined the team. I think that the Tommy Oliver character is sort of, I think, the real turning point for the show, where it becomes much more compelling. And it's undeniable the guy was super talented, super charismatic, beloved by fans. There's a reason that he kept making return appearances, only very recently saying that he has officially retired from the role. I know that the current Power Rangers production probably reached out to him as they're hosting kind of a mini Mighty Morphin reunion for the anniversary. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that we're never going to have another return performance of Jason David Frank as Tommy Oliver, because it's just such a pivotal character to not just Power Rangers, but I think to so many people's childhoods. And so, I wholeheartedly echo what you said about, his loved ones and his family, and they're in our thoughts. And this is just an absolute tragedy and a huge loss to the nerd world as well.
Just think about how revolutionary that storyline was, to have an adversary, switch sides and become, a hero. That was, think in the time of when that happened in 93, of all the quote unquote anti-heroes or troubled protagonists, or people with, heroes with red in their ledger, and everything that kind of sprung from that. And this was not necessarily the first, but really one of the at least for me, one of the most memorable ones that started this that kind of endeavor.
And you can talk qualitatively about how later seasons of Power Rangers might have been better acted, or have had some better writing, because Mighty Morphin was in a lot of ways the trailblazer. But I still hold up, I think, that Green Ranger 4 or 5 part or whatever it was, as just one of the finest moments of the entire franchise. It was just so compelling to see this new Ranger pop up and tear through the original team, and then ultimately be revealed to be brainwashed, and then separate himself from the villains and join the team of heroes. I mean, that whole storyline was just so compelling, and I think still stands as one of the best in the whole franchise.
All right, Dave, we have a very fascinating news story from your end.
Yeah, so this is a weird one. So as the nerds probably have heard at this point, Microsoft has been working on acquiring Activision Blizzard for a reported $69 billion. This is, of course, just the latest in a series of acquisitions, as Microsoft has been pouring money into acquiring various studios and game developers in an effort, I think, to bolster its catalog and position its Xbox brand as more of a sort of a must-have. And Activision Blizzard in particular has gotten a whole bunch of people very nervous. In particular, the place where a lot of nerves are rattled by this news is, of course, over at Sony, where there has been huge concerns that once Microsoft owns Activision, that they could potentially make the mega blockbuster franchise Call of Duty an Xbox and PC exclusive, and thereby cutting out a whole bunch of potential customers that might buy a PlayStation, but then would probably prefer to play on PC or buy an Xbox, just because of Call of Duty being one of their main games that they enjoy. And so this has been very carefully looked at by the Federal Trade Commission. There's also been regulators in Europe looking at this very carefully, because there's concerns that this is going to create sort of an unfair market condition, where basically the biggest video game franchise in the world sits with one company like that, who is also a hardware manufacturer, thereby being able to lock in people into their hardware. Now, there's been sort of reporting from Bloomberg behind the scenes a little bit. Nothing has been officially announced, that the FTC is positioning itself to challenge this acquisition and block the purchase. And Microsoft is apparently not willing to go down without a fight. And according to the newest Bloomberg report, is gearing up to contest any blocking of this acquisition in court, which means that we could have a protracted court case where Microsoft is trying to purchase this company, and the federal government is attempting to block it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that there's a certain amount of bias in me when it comes to this situation, because I am a big fan of Microsoft's Xbox brand, and I think that this would be a good thing for that brand. At the same time, though, I also find it incredibly fascinating that this particular situation is where the federal government and the FTC are trying to stake their case against monopoly, considering the positioning of Amazon, the positioning of Google, and so many other things that have been happening, not just in the tech world, but in the business world, period. That of all the things that where they want to stake their claim, it's Sony does not want to lose Call of Duty. I find this whole situation extremely fascinating. I'm very, very curious to hear, Kris, your thoughts on this matter.
Yeah, you almost took the words right from my mouth. I think immediately of Disney and their proliferation of this IP arms race. Why is this, the final nail in the coffin for the federal government to step in? Is there a secret society of Call of Duty gamers in the federal government that we don't know about? Why is this the thing? I know that I'm not a Call of Duty person, but I know that they recently released the new one, I believe. So, that makes it's an interesting context as well. but I'm not sure. I'm fascinated to see this play out, and I'm right there along with you. I'm an Xbox only gamer. My Series S is the only um, console that I have at the moment. I'm very pleased with it. So I'm just gonna sit back with my popcorn and watch this unfold because it is really, really interesting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is interesting. I also think there's something extremely troubling about this, though. Obviously, Sony has been excellently positioned in recent years in its competition with the Xbox brand. Um, and so seeing Microsoft make some moves to position the Xbox brand more favorably is I think absolutely a great thing for competition. So basically saying that Call of Duty of all things is the sacred cow that must be multi-platform is interesting, especially considering that Microsoft has not made any announcements or moves that Call of Duty would be somehow exclusive to its platforms. And in fact, most of their recent acquisitions, they have not made any major moves to make multi-platform games suddenly locked in as an exclusive. So I understand to some extent the concern of Sony that they're going to lose this powerhouse as a reason to buy PlayStation. But on the other hand, like so far at least, there has been no major moves to make multi-platform games exclusive. And at least the way the market is positioned right now, I think Microsoft would be extremely silly to do so, as they would be leaving some serious dough on the floor. I don't think they make particularly a lot of money off of hardware sales, right? It's mostly software. So making Call of Duty exclusive to move more hardware units, I don't know if that's a good long-term strategy. At least not the way the market is right now. I mean, that could change in the future, obviously. But it's very, very odd to me that Call of Duty has become the sacred cow that's got everybody's knickers in a twist, so to speak.
I don't know I don't have any hardcore data to back this up. But you hit the nail on the head. Is all of the Bethesda games are still available across platform? Am I correct in making that statement?
Yeah, as far as I know, everything Bethesda is still multi-platform. There has not been any move to change anything about that, as far as I know.
So just for me as a consumer, when I recently made the purchase of this Series S, having those Bethesda games available day one at no additional cost with the Game Pass subscription, like that's a strong enough selling point to where you don't have to make it exclusive. But if you make it an inclusion there in the Game Pass element, I think that's a strong enough statement and a strong enough sales pitch, if you will, that you don't even have to make it exclusive.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair as well. I mean, there. I don't know, man. This is just a weird situation to me. Not because there's concerns about monopoly, because I think that is a valid concern. I think that's just a valid concern across the board. However, it's just that this is the sacred cow. This is the place where we're going to have the federal government step in. That seems just incredibly odd to me. Alrighty, folks. Well, that's it for Nerd News. Stick around as Kris and I, together with X of Words creator and host Ash, will dissect Wakanda Forever. Alrighty, folks, and we're back with this week's And as promised, this week we will be reviewing the sequel to 2018's Black Panther, this year's Wakanda Forever. And to add a much-needed perspective to our review, we have invited a special guest, and that is, of course, Ash, who is the creator and host of the X of Words podcast. Ash, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
So as we usually do when we review one of these movies, we are going to go ahead and each break down our 3 major likes and our 3 major dislikes before kind of putting a final grade and bow on the whole thing. And since we have Ash as our special guest, we'll go ahead and start with him. Ash, what is your first major like of Black Panther Wakanda Forever?
First, my first like is probably the costuming. And I think that's something that hits me from the moment the movie starts, and it's been consistent across both movies. But just the level and the quality of even the smallest details, from the architecture to the costumes to the weaponry to the tech, everything is so intentional. And it's meant to be evocative of different tribes, of different time periods. And one of the things that I loved most about the first film was, I mean, I loved the first film, but then post-film, getting to watch it again when it released digitally and like pause it and really deep dive into stuff, and then jumping back and seeing all the background of the design was like a major benefit for me.
Yeah, just give Ruthie Carter does it again. Like, it's incredible to me that like someone can be at the top of their game, like to that level.
You know how Amazon Prime Video has like that X-ray feature where you get like all these little bits of information while you're watching the movie?
Yeah.
They could about do that whole feature in nothing but costuming for this movie. Like you could have all these little things popping up that just like gives you the background of how the various costumes were designed, how the sets were designed, what various, you know, cultures are supposed to be referenced by this piece and that piece, and it would probably be like the coolest feature to add to this movie because there's so much going on.
Exactly. And I don't think that's a particularly easy job either, because like we know, a lot of comics play very fast and loose with any sort of cultural background that doesn't come from, you know, America, basically. So I think Ruthie Carter had the job of not only bringing to life the comics aspect of Black Panther and the way people dressed, but also in correcting some of the mistakes. So it's like this incredible melding of fantasy, but real world history, and then the comics influence as well. And I particularly respected what she did with M'Baku, because I think there could have been so many ways to get essentially a gorilla outfit wrong, and she managed to tread a line. And I think that to me was like indicative of how well she can merge real history with comics history and give it to you in a way that still feels authentic and just beautiful and gorgeous to look at.
All right, Dave, what is your first big like of this film? You couldn't wait. As soon as you had finished it, you were immediately texting me this.
Oh yeah. The very first thing was just how much I like Shuri in this movie. I mean, Letitia Wright was sort of a scene stealer already in the first one, and Shuri kind of was like my favorite new character introduced to the MCU there for a while. But she was, you know, the sidekick, you know, kid sister character, and here she, you know, she gets to take this character and fully bring the performance into her own, and it's fantastic the way she, you know, kind of portrays those stages of grief and how she's trying to deal with the loss of her brother and what she considers her own personal failure. The performance is what anchors the movie. Without a strong performance from Letitia Wright here, the whole thing would have fallen apart. And she just rose to the challenge perfectly, absolutely pitch perfect. Every time she was on screen, I was mesmerized. It's just a fantastic performance.
Oh, okay, cool. I agree, but I also think. Sorry, am I allowed to?
Yeah, go.
Of course,
jump in anywhere. Yeah,
go, please.
Thank you. I haven't been a guest in so long. It's like
you're used to be on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I need to take my shoes off. But
please don't.
I totally agree with you, but I also think that like Ryan Coogler wrote this in such a way that, for me at least, Letitia Wright's story in the film was the story of Letitia Wright. Shuri and Letitia Wright have exactly the same arc. So the passing of Chadwick Boseman puts Shuri in a position where suddenly she has to take the helm of this huge thing that she didn't think that she'd ever have to be in charge of. And Letitia Wright, the passing of Chadwick, suddenly throws her into having to take the helm of the Black Panther franchise, which she never thought she'd be the part of. And I thought the beauty of it, and especially when I think it was focused for me in Letitia Wright, is how the reality of the story mirrored the reality of the actors themselves.
Yeah.
And so for me, even because I thought there were certain times where Letitia was a bit awkward, like she stepped into that leading role a little bit awkwardly. But for me, that added to the authenticity of the role, because it would be awkward. You know, and every time Letitia was a bit awkward, or I was like, it made me think, well, yeah, she's been thrown into this. Both Shuri has both been thrown into this, and Letitia's been thrown into this. So for me, there was no way she could take a wrong step, because when she embodied the role, I was so proud to see her embody the role, and in those times where I thought that, you know, the punch could have been a bit harder, or the emotion could have been a bit deeper, I was like, I got it. And I think knowing the circumstances of both the character and the actor made her performance so much more meaningful to me watching it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think for me, what I appreciated about it the most was how relatable her procession of grief was. She went from denial to anger to rage to, well, I need to do things so differently than T'Challa did. And then it was like an overcorrection. And then you kind of find whatever balance. And that's so relatable, even outside of losing someone and loss in the family. It's, you know, when you become like an adult, whether you're a parent or not, you kind of are like, well, I like what this I enjoyed what my parents did and that legacy that they passed down to me or my grandparents. And I've still got to find your own space, and that was so real to me.
It's tricky. It's tough, because there was a lot of loss in that movie, and it was a lot. I mean, what did you think generally about the way that she handled loss as a topic?
It was a complicated thing because, like you said, there was so much reality to it, and then she kind of straddled the fence of. Her relationship with Namor was fascinating, because she was like, he's really laying down some facts, and maybe we should really do this. And yes, my brother was too noble. And then without him there to anchor her as he was in the first film, the only real anchor that she had was her mother. And then when she was gone, that took everything. And so she was lost in the abyss or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, so what is your first like of the movie?
Okay, so I called this. I think I posted the tweet, but I said that I desperately, as someone who's a big fan of mythology, and of course someone who's obsessed with Mesoamerican and Latine culture and indigenous culture, I said I need Mesoamerican deities on the screen, represented just like their Norse counterparts, like their Greco-Roman counterparts, and here it is. I loved everything about Namor. I thought Tenoch everything we talked about with Shuri, in the film and outside of it. I love everything that he represents, and standing up for indigenous rights and the colorism and racism that takes place in his native Mexico. I loved his origin story. I thought it was so brilliant and smart. I loved his motivation, the fact that, they found this new home under the sea, and I loved baby Namor just laying waste to the plantation. It was a great moment, and then everything about his presence, I thought it was palpable, I thought it was powerful, and I think this, I don't know if it's recency bias or whatever, or my bilingual bias, but I think this might be my favorite MCU villain.
I also think it's probably fair to say that it's the best reinvention of a comic book character that the MCU has done. I mean, they have done, changes and tweaks to characters as they bring them to the screen, but this is probably the ideal scenario. Like they took a character that is good in the comic books and actually were able to improve on him. And I really do think this is a vast improvement. It's a fantastic interpretation of the character.
I agree. And I think, the MCU synergy, you can already see the push starting to go the other way. Like, there are certain changes that happen in the MCU that have an outsized impact on the comics. And the amount of fan art that I've seen of this new version of Namor is incredible. So I've been sitting here silently waiting for the on-panel Namor to have a little bit of a shift.
Similar to what they did with Aquaman in DC.
Yeah, and the Aquaman thing was pretty subtle, besides, giving him long hair and some tattoos. But I think this is a much more significant shift, and I think it would be really smart in a lot of ways. I think one of the things this has done is created a very, very strong differentiation between Aquaman and Namor. I mean, that's something that, considering that Aquaman made it to the screen first, I think that's something that was desperately needed for the general audience to be like, oh, this isn't just like off-brand Aquaman. And I would like to see a little bit of backwashing into the comic books for this interpretation. I think that would be really good for the comics.
Yeah, I think not to spoil my next big like, but I think when you say the best reinvention, I would still hold out for M'Baku, but I love specifically what Ta-Nehisi Coates did with the Imperial Galactic Empire of Wakanda, and in reintroducing both Nakia and M'Baku into the comics. And that was, sometimes we complain about the MCUification of the comics, and sometimes it kind of waters it down and distills it to something we don't want it to be. But I think in this case, it's an added benefit.
Definitely. And just before you move on, like the other thing that I really liked about Namor was, and forgive me for not saying his name as you're saying it,
Namor. Got to get that R rolling if you want to do it like Chris.
No. You only roll the R if it begins with an R, if there's a double R. So
okay, boss. I'll work on that.
What? Jesus Christ. Ever since I got my tonsils removed and I can't make that sound anymore. I'm dead serious. That is not a fucking joke. Like they took, what's that thing? Your uvula?
Yeah.
They took out the tonsils and the uvula and I just cannot roll my R's.
They took out your uvula?
Yeah, gone.
Is that a thing? Or was an added extra, like a +1?
While we're in here, we're just going to take this thing really.
Of course it wasn't added extra.
I'm completely ignorant of a tonsillectomy. Like, is that a...
What, are you trying to say they did buy one get one free in my mouth?
Yeah.
Get one half off.
I only know it as the thing that's swinging the back of your throat. I've been listening to too much Cardi.
Oh dear! Not
okay.
We're going down a bad road.
Like, we are talking about Namor, and that is a large portion of the support behind him, isn't it?
Listen, I don't want to put my dirty feet on your couch, so I didn't want to bring that energy to you people's fine establishment. But yes. But also the thing I really did love about it was talking about the reinvention. I think Namor was this perfect split of additive reinvention of new aspects that really enriched the character and gave him like a better backstory, or something meaty that gave him like animus and context, but also keeping some of the campy that was iconic about the character. Like I was so happy to see that he had the little wings, and then when they started doing the hummingbird thing, I was like, yes. And the way he flew, I think whoever designed the way Namor flew was one of the geniuses of the movie, because there's so many ways that could have gone wrong. But this almost skiing, it was insane. And I remember walking out going, they've managed to not only depth in the character, but keep the cheesy bits and make them compelling. And that was incredible.
Yeah, making ankle wings work was quite a trick, I have to say.
Yeah.
And most importantly, he's the big time asshole, and that keeping that part of it.
That's true. Yeah, but then it's Ryan Coogler, so he's never going to give you an asshole that you can't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, he's an asshole, but you're always going, I mean, I see how you got there.
Listen, I immediately flash back to the British Museum part from the first film, and I was like, that Killmonger moment is still one of my favorites. Yeah,
like Ryan Coogler's antagonists are basically like, I get it, but whoa.
A little too much dip on your chip.
Do you know what I mean?
I was riding with you for a minute.
Yeah, easy, bro. Like, come on. There's a lot of people in that city. Like, it was, yeah, but it's good. It's good. It was a good interpretation for sure.
All right, Ash, what is the next big like that you have for this film?
Riri was a big like. And I pivoted to this because M'Baku was a big like, but that was like a sneak hit. Like, I didn't realize how much I loved M'Baku's role and what he stood for and what he represented in the film until I walked away from it and realized that he was in the background of everything. But then Riri, I think, was one of the shining stars for me, because there's a bit of a legacy of black characters in the MCU getting their foot up through other films. So Black Panther was introduced in an Avengers film, and Riri is introduced here. And I don't know why I like this sort of, I liked that Riri got her first run in a Black Panther movie. I think that was iconic. Like, and that to me, there was something about it, like metatextually, about how Chadwick opened the door. You know, Chadwick had to do his introduction as part of an ensemble of, 17 other white heroes. And he created a foundation that was so strong that Riri gets to be introduced in a Black Panther film, surrounded by Letitia Wright, by Angela Bassett, by these incredible actors. And I was just like, that felt like Chadwick's legacy to me as well. She had an incredible debut. I think the comedy things were on point. It was never too much.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Thor. Like,
hey.
Not. Have you seen that? Have you seen that video where like Migos all stand up out of the chairs?
Yeah.
Okay, look, Thor is a funny movie, but it starts to die by having too many comedy relief characters. There's only so many comedy relief characters you can have in a film before everything becomes a punchline. And I think she had a perfect introduction, comic relief turn, and a nice conclusion. I'm really, really looking forward to this series. I don't know where we go. I mean, I think I'm assuming that the Wakandans are going to take back the suit that she built there.
Yes.
The big mecha suit that she had. Was I a super fan of it? I don't know. But I'm looking forward to see what they do.
Yeah, I had never seen any of Dominique Thorne's work, but she immediately won me over. I was just like, this is magnificent. I thought that her delivery was authentic and real, and I like what Tevin said in the group chat. It feels like a smart mouth cousin. Like it felt authentic
True.
and real, and it felt like someone just like who runs their mouth 24/7 but can back it up at the same time.
Yes, and the instant chemistry that she had with Denai, so Okoye, was incredible. I mean, they shared maybe 2 scenes over the whole film, but when they were in the the small girl bit, when she goes to throw the she goes to throw like a space heater or something.
Yeah. And then she's like has a stereo system or something over her head while she's saying it. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the bits that I think shone out for me, and the fact that she could have like this really sort of sisterly, and at times seemed a little bit maybe even flirtatious energy with Letitia Wright. The fact that she could like be so instantly like bonded to Okoye, she was an amazing like piece of glue throughout the series. Every character that she interacted with, there was like a unique but valuable dynamic that she created. And I'm really looking forward to see what she does with Ironheart.
And I will say I don't know much about the character from the comic books. I kind of just peripherally have encountered the character. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that it was very, very smart to introduce the character in a Black Panther movie. I think this could have gone very wrong if they would have introduced the character earlier in an Iron Man 3 or something like that. Like having her divorced a little bit from this Iron Man legacy and kind of latching her on more with a connection with Wakanda, I think is really, really smart.
Dave, what is the next big that you have for this film?
So as of this recording, I just yesterday watched the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special, which is a whole separate conversation. But watching this movie and that Christmas special back to back, I got something from the MCU that I usually don't get, which is emotional resonance. I feel like, the MCU movies are generally really good popcorn movies, but they don't usually hit the emotional beats as strongly as they could or should. I mean, we got a whole Thor movie. I know we're picking on Thor, Chris, but we got a whole Thor movie where one of the central conceits is that Jane Foster's dying of cancer, and I don't think the emotional the resonance of that was ever truly explored in the movie. It was so busy, wink, wink, nudge, nudging the whole time that the strong emotion of the moment was kind of left on the floor. And I know that there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes, with the passing of Chadwick Boseman and everything, that kind of left that emotional rawness sort of as the starting point of the script, the starting point of the performances. So there's a very real world origin of that emotional rawness. But when I look at this, and then I look at sort of the sweetness of the emotion presented in the Guardians of the Galaxy special, what I realize is that this is something I sorely miss. It's just some emotional heft to these movies. I think so much of the MCU is spending way too much time trying to be lighthearted and fun and humorous, that they let real genuine emotion just sometimes just on the cutting room floor. Or I don't know. But this was a heightened experience and a much better experience for a superhero movie to feel real emotion in the characters and in the performances. And I wish they would find a way to duplicate this kind of thing without having to lose somebody. It's an absolute tragedy what happened behind the scenes. I just wish that we could get some of this emotional resonance in other projects as well.
I don't know how to follow that. Yeah, it's really powerful and impactful.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, I liked what you said at the end as well, because I sometimes balk at the silver lining of Black Death. Black people die, and people go, "Oh, well, it did." And I'm glad actually that we're all sort of on the same foot of thinking that they had to do this. This had to be a tribute to Chadwick. It had
Absolutely.
to be. There was no other film they could have made, and I'm glad it was. And I think for the most part, it was a great tribute. I think it was compassionate in the way that it handled the textual passing. I think it was gracious in the way that it had handled the metatextual passing, in that it gave the actors an outlet, and it's almost like they could mourn him in a way that honored him globally.
Yeah, and that's very powerful. Yeah,
it is. But I totally agree with you. It shouldn't be a learning period. I don't want to cast it as I don't want to frame it as like a learning thing, but yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. That actually emotion is something that the other movies should be embodying. And you're right. And I think I'm not going to say I don't mean it, because I do mean it. I'm going to get Thor again.
God.
I'm sorry. Look, you chose. You're totally right. The fact that Jane Foster is suffering terminal cancer, and we spend a ridiculous amount of the film looking at guy, what's his name? Russell Crowe.
Oh, the guy who plays Zeus, yeah.
Yeah, and watching goats slam into the moon, and it's just it felt like they misjudged what the story was. Those were all pieces that could have elevated or brought lightness to the main story of a hero who has to choose between altruism and survival. But they prioritized it differently, and here they were forced to prioritize it. Not even forced. No, they weren't forced at all, because I'm sure they wanted to honor Chadwick, and they wouldn't have wanted this to be slapstick or humorous anyway. But just comparing those two movies, yeah, I think emotion could be a much, much more central, meaningful part of going forward.
All right, Chris. So, what is your second like of the movie?
I hinted at it before, and you guys have both commented on it as well. But I just love the story of M'Baku. I love that complete restoration of the Jabari tribe with the rest of the tribes of Wakanda. I think it's just a beautiful full circle moment. It was the reason that I was campaigning for him to be the new Black Panther, and if I've read reports correctly, there were quick reports and considerations of him and Nakia, my 1 and 2 picks, to be the Panther for a short period of time. But I like that they did it this way, and I think it was much more meaningful than just putting him in a suit. I think what Winston Duke brings to the role and to the fandom as well, he's a great online presence. He's a very kind individual from everything I've seen. And I particularly love the scene where he's standing and talking with Shuri. It was just really part of that emotional impact for me, and how his kind of story has has come full circle, and now that he's the king of Wakanda. So I love everything about M'Baku, and I think it's my personal favorite retooling in the MCU.
It is a fantastic character, and not to put the cart before the horse, one of my dislikes of the movie is that M'Baku was not in it more. The character is absolutely fantastic, and the performances as well. I don't think I ever enjoyed somebody eating a carrot as much as that scene at the beginning with M'Baku, and it's just that whole carrot scene was absolutely fantastic. It's a really, really cool character that I think people seem to think works best in small doses, but I think he would work much better in even bigger doses. My hope is that now that he's king of Wakanda, that we're going to see, in a potential third movie, a lot more of him.
I loved that the things that made him the best pick for king was exactly the reason why he would never do it. Like, he was so supportive and wanted to help other people flourish and grow.
Yeah,
I really loved. I think he was an amazingly well-rounded character. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah. Who do you think was the better comic? Who do you think was the better comic relief, Riri or M'Baku?
I think comic relief, I would give it to Riri, but I think he, like I said, he had that emotional resonance, and I think he shifted he was the comic relief from the first film, and there was more depth to him, I think, in this one.
I think that's fair. All right, Ash, I do believe we are at your third like for the movie.
Yeah. I think I've kind of covered it, honestly. I think I kind of covered it. Yeah, it was honoring Chadwick. I mean, it was beautiful. I think the funeral scene particularly was beautiful and it was very sad. It was celebratory, it was sad, but it was celebratory. And that's what I liked about it. And I liked that we got a movie that was a celebration of all the things that the character meant to people and all the things that Chadwick as an actor and a friend meant to the cast. Even in other people's journey through grief, I think it was handled really, really respectfully. And I mean, I'll touch on M'Baku, and I think M'Baku's role, and even M'Baku and Ramonda are just loving, in holding Letitia's hand through the film, in supporting each other. And I think that the fact that the cast, both the actors and their characters, sort of hold space for each other and support each other and lift each other up through the trials that come from, the loss itself and then the consequences of the loss itself, was all a celebration of Chadwick's effect. Because, I mean, when you hear people speak about him, he was that, he was very supportive and somebody that everybody felt close to and felt they could rely on and engaged and connected with people. And that the characters would sort of rally around each other, I think, was an amazing testament to that.
I don't think I can really add much to that. I think that's pretty much spot on.
Dave, what is your third and final like of the film? I'm really interested to dive into this.
Yeah, and I felt right away when I put this in our shared document here that this is something that you were going to be interested in talking about, because it is something that resonates with both of us. The movie, to some extent, the first movie did this as well, but I think it comes on much more to the forefront than the second one, is that there's a really strong connection to history, and to the notion of Western civilization and its exploitation of resources from other civilizations. I think that is something that in historical circles, as somebody who studied history, in historical circles, that is talked about a lot. There's all sorts of extensive meditations on why this imbalance occurred, why Western civilization was able to come in and dominate others. I know there's a really good book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, that does a really good job of trying to analyze that, even though it doesn't come to a clear answer, because there's not always a clear answer when you're looking at historical conundrums like this. But I think it is not something that popular culture or general audiences always really think about in let's say this neck of the woods, as they say. I think this is something where the civilizations that experienced exploitation of resources, exploitation of labor, they're acutely aware of this. But the exploiters, the descendants of the exploiters, are not acutely aware of this. And being able to bring that conversation to the forefront in a superhero movie, a blockbuster tentpole movie of all things, and having that commentary, is fascinating. And even bringing up the notion of continued exploitation, which is what the CIA subplot is doing. And I didn't like the CIA subplot much, but there was an attempt at least to tie into that. Like there is this nation that has this resource, and we want it, and we will do whatever we need to get it, and not just get it, but be the sole holder of this resource. I think those are conversations that need to be had. And seeing a pop culture pillar like the MCU being willing to use a character like Namor and say, look, this is the history of exploitation. You need to be aware of this. You need to have an understanding of this. I think that's bold. And was really, really an interesting thing to see in an MCU movie of all things. So I really, really liked the strong connection to history and its commentary that it was willing to do, which I think a lot of other blockbusters would not be willing to do for fear of alienating audiences. So I thought this was really bold.
Yeah, I think it also grounded it in some authenticity, and it made it real. And I think it made the inspiration and the backstory for Namor all that much more believable. I really was surprised that it made as strong a statement as it did. I think looking at our dislikes in the chart right here, we all are taking pot shots at the CIA storyline here coming down the pipe, but I was surprised that it was willing to make that strong of a statement, and it was a pleasant surprise.
I think that's core to it being a good movie. I don't think you can make a movie about Wakanda without those themes being the forefront. Because I think like Wakanda as a concept is just an answer to the question. It's grounded in the history of exploitation. It's grounded in geopolitical realities. And it's just an answer to the question of what if an African nation was untouched? Like that, and that's it. And I think that if you make a movie about that nation that somehow shies away from the themes and foundations that the very idea was born from, you'd be doing it a massive disservice. So I think, to your point, Dave, when you were talking about, these realities not being so much of a top theme here, I agree. And it brought to mind that, the axe forgets and the tree remembers.
And it's interesting too. I had to think a little bit, with the history of exploitation, all of that. I had to think a little bit about the British Museum and all those artifacts that are held there from other civilizations. Particularly, there are a bunch from African civilizations, and every time that returning these artifacts is brought up, the officials running the British Museum just come out and basically say, nah, we're not doing that. And it's one of those fascinating things that is still on the forefront of the minds of those that have been exploited, but it's still also very much dismissed by the exploiters. Even like making things right is not something that people seem very interested in.
Oh no. And I think that this is one of the few films, I don't even think it was bold because, all right, in every country, there are people who know the Black Panther version of the story. But the mainstream movies and what you see usually is a total trivialization. And even at times like fluff pieces for imperialism, militarism, genocidal proactive intervention in other countries. I mean, there's a whole half of the other half of Marvel itself is like propaganda for the military. So the only thing that might be contradictory for me is that you've also got Captain America, who for the longest time was like USA, and then you've got Black Panther going, really? But it's like this is the reality of this is the reality of Western impact without the rose tinted glasses on it. Like this is how America, France, the UK look from the other side of the fence, and I think it was just a very clear look because, of course, the Black Panther is no longer in position, and the bullshit starts. And I think one of the most powerful scenes in the movie is when, do you know what? I keep on having to remind myself to call her Ramonda and not Angela Bassett.
Right.
I have to remind myself that like she's playing a character, but I can't. It's tricky. But when she walks into the is it the UN?
Yeah, it's the UN.
Yeah, it's the UN.
Yeah, when she walks into the UN with the mercenaries, I was like, yes, because think about how many other films think about the hundreds of films we've seen where we would be with the mercenary team.
Oh, yeah.
We'd watch them do the heist. We'd watch them come in, and all these nameless, faceless Africans would have been getting shot and stabbed on the way to get something for their country. And like, that's what it is. Suddenly we're on the other side of it. And that's why I think so much of this had to be grounded in it, because in other countries that heist succeeds. In reality, that heist has succeeded. And here, this is like an imagination of what happens should had an African nation been left unmolested long enough to get the wherewithal to start really batting off colonialist advances, just exploitative advances. And I think that's one of the most powerful and meaningful and like valued themes of the movie for me. Because there's a couple of points where something happens and I go, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you wish that people could say these things and take these moves on the global stage in the real world. But I do enjoy it. And I agree with you that I think it's a very valuable central theme. Yeah.
I also love, the first teaser that we got during San Diego Comic-Con, I probably watched at least 50 or 60 times, just because it was the first morsel that we had gotten. But it also shows how brilliantly that was edited, because that scene that we got in the trailer of Okoye and the Dora Milaje stepping out from the shadows, that's that scene where they open the door thinking they're going to get those resources and they step out. It was, oh my God.
Say that again.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
All right, Chris. So what's your final like here?
Well, it's Angela Bassett. Like, my God, like what a performance. You said it, that the scene at the UN, the way that she delivers that speech and the way that scene is kind of juxtaposed with the heist, you just assume, as Ash said, it's going to be successful because it's always successful. And then, to have that flipped and then for them to show up with these mercenaries, and then, have the French and American ambassadors. I think it was the French and American ambassadors lunch for them, like to steal their lunch money like that in the UN was magnificent. And I thought that magnificent. I thought it was
magnificent.
I thought it was a tour de force performance. And I just love Angela Bassett to the moon and back. So this was magnificent to me.
I mean, she showed incredible restraint. I would have thrown a shoe at them people.
Yeah, that's fair.
Nah, you would have had to drag me out of that place because everybody's getting it. I'm throwing hands at everybody. Because that woman, like they were sitting there. That one was sitting there with his long throat, looking in Angela Bassett's face. The cheek.
What did Yanis called her? Emily in Paris.
If a spear had gone through his chest into the back of his seat, I wouldn't have even looked up. Like I strongly hated everybody in that room, and yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I got nothing. She's flawless. So I think this brings us to the portion where we get to talk about dislikes. And I think I'm going to go ahead and just freely admit that finding things in this movie to dislike was rather difficult. So between the three of us coming up with 9 dislikes is a bit challenging. And I do think there is some significant overlap in some of the things we've chosen. But why don't we go ahead and jump in with Ash? What's your first dislike of Black Panther Wakanda Forever?
I'm sorry to say this. I hope I don't sound ridiculous, but it's still dark. There were still bits in it where I was like, what is happening here? I just think that as much, and okay, the detailing in the costuming is so beautiful. And
so why don't they turn on the light?
Yeah, the main costume is so gorgeous, but it's also black. And so I feel like we get, and I know that in this one, if you notice that this one is a lot more shiny than the previous one. Because when you look at Chadwick's costumes in the first film, they're gorgeous, but you have to see them in full light, and then you see all of the patternings and all of the textural changes and the differences. But they're beautiful when you get up close. And this one, I think they built it to be a lot more to look good and still detailed and rich in motion. But there was still a couple of scenes where I was like, this seems quite dark, and I especially would have liked to see some detail on. Essentially, this was just a costuming point. I'm only saying this because when this comes out digitally, I pause the film to look at all the clothes, and the underwater scenes, and the one on the bridge, I think was a little bit dark at times, and that was it for me.
I read that completely like, oh, dark themes, but no, I totally get it now. Yeah, it's funny, particularly I think of Talokan when you say that, because they have this sun. I need your sun to suns a little bit more. I want to see some of that stuff. The sun is not sunning. Yeah.
It's like, where did you get this? Where did you get this?
Big Lots?
Can we do you know what I mean? Is it Shane? But the thing is there's so much. There are so many amazing ideas at play, like Talokan being this completely non-directional architectural city was gorgeous, and I was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, yes, exactly. Like if you were building a city underwater, there is no natural up. You know that you could build a completely 3-dimensional city. It was incredible, and I suppose that's, you know, apart from it sometimes not being lit in a way that allows you to pore over every detail, I think it's a success. It's a victim of its own successes, if I can ever say that sentence. Where they've created a world that is so rich, that is so detailed, and is so well thought out that you want to go everywhere. You want to do every side mission, and the film doesn't allow you to do that. And I walked away from it just like, you know.
All right, Dave, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but your first dislike of the film.
Yeah, I just think there was not enough M'Baku. I think that character had an interesting space that he was occupying. You mentioned, you know, how he was less comedic relief and more sort of an emotional center. Somebody who was trying to help, you know, center Shuri a little bit, and I think we could have had a little bit more of that. And then I think the payoff at the end when he decides to challenge to become king of Wakanda would have, you know, had a little bit stronger resonance. I think it was good as it was, but I just wanted more from the character.
I mean, we've all been reciting the cool Khan line, right?
Yeah, I love how he says that. It's so good. The guy is just incredible. What a performance! All right, Chris. So, what's your first major dislike?
Maybe this is a hot take because I know she has a lot of fans, but I don't like Julia Louis-Dreyfus as the Contessa. 18 different names. She's great in like comedic roles. I'm not a Seinfeld person, but I enjoyed her in like things like Arrested Development. I've heard Veep is good, so I always see her as a comedic presence. And when I think of the Contessa Valentina, whatever, that's much more like a cutthroat, evil Nick Fury behind the scenes type of character. That's not a comedic character to me. So I don't like her in this role.
Fair. I'm having trouble caring, I think, is my problem. and I'll talk more about that here in a sec. But yeah, I just struggle caring about the character and what she's doing. I know this is supposed to all lead to Thunderbolts and all that, but I don't particularly care about that team either. So like my caring meter is like at -4 right now, and nothing that I've seen from the character has made me change my mind.
I love how specific that was.
Yeah, it's -4, maybe -4.5. Not quite -5 though.
Like this, he really ran the math. Get your own fucking film. I don't want to do no. I'm sorry, and you know what? I'm gonna say it. I don't want to do setup for a white people film here. You've got 16 other films you can do that. This is Caucasian people's business. I don't care what's going on in your marriage. When they're going, oh, we used to be married, I was like, good for you.
All the Caucasians to the back.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you want us to say about this? What do you want us to do about it? They started doing shit with handcuffs. I was like, can you do this somewhere else? I just felt like every time they came on, like, even when he was running in the woods, I was like, I don't give a that you're on a run. And then it started playing rock music. It started playing, what was it playing? The only time I heard any type of rock riff was when he was running in the woods, and I was like, God, we've got to. I know it was probably in Coogler's contract of like there needs to be 7 minutes of footage of white people, please, Coogler. So we got it, but also, I mean, I do think it served a purpose. I think, especially in this film, they were meant to, especially the Countessa, was meant to be a distillation of, toxic myopic Westernism. Every like white person who stood for a particular country, except what's his name, was just another self-serving, exploitative snake. You know, and I think their relationship really was meant to be juxtaposed to the Ramondas, to the Riris, to the Letitias, to the Mbakus. I know that was a weird mix of sort of actor name and character name, but please, like, walk with me. All of these people, all of the people in Wakanda are forming community. And they're trying to navigate their community with Namor and other other groups of people who also have their own things. And then you've got like, what's her name? She comes in, and not only is she exploiting everybody, not only is she tricking and deceiving everybody, she acts with absolutely no honor to anybody she meets, or even the husband that she claims to still have some sort of, vibe with. And I was just like, that's an indictment. This character in this relationship is meant to be an indictment of what you stand for.
Yeah, I think that ties up a little bit of one of your dislikes, but do you want to share another?
I think that was it. I think I only had 2. It was a bit dark at times.
You said too much CIA, still a bit dark, and then no third.
No third. Yeah, that was it. There was no third. Yeah, it was too much. It was too much CIA. Like I get it, and I knew they had to be there, but I'm not sure what the character, and not even CIA is sort of an entity, because I think that's always going to be part of this. But like you said, the specific focus on the Countessa, and it's like, what is she here for? Yeah, that was it. And those are my 2. Actually, let me pass it on. So, Dave, what's yours?
Oh, this is exactly pretty much the same thing. I mean, I think we're all kind of picking on the white people in this movie, and
which is great.
Probably fair. Yeah, because to me, like that whole Everett Ross subplot went absolutely nowhere. So he was married to the Contessa, and he's trying to help Wakanda. He gets arrested. He gets freed. Boom. Nothing. It leads nowhere. It's like the absolute road to nothingness. And every time that the whole CIA thing came on the screen, it was absolutely irrelevant to me. I just kind of got bored. And so I think it's a shame, too, because, there's some good actors involved in all that, but it was just not going anywhere. It felt basically exactly like you said. It felt like something that was like mandated. This has to be here, but it's not really relevant enough to the rest of the movie. It's all about setup for future stuff. And that's the only part of the movie that I felt just completely fell flat.
To me, they felt like seams that they felt like scenes that could have been lifted from Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yes.
Here's how forgettable it was. Dave put Ross Everett in the doc, I told him it was Everett Ross. He said, "I don't care." That's how forgettable he was.
And I'm just going to say, dude, I knew you were going to bring that up, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. They were there. I mean, good for them, I guess.
You showed up, have a participation trophy.
Congrats, good for you.
I said this before, but I guess Everett Ross is like the new bare minimum for allyship. Are you willing to get arrested for Wakanda?
And the thing is, you're a spy. You've been doing this.
Yeah.
And then, and to be honest, and the worst bit was every bit of goodwill that I had built up for Everett Ross over the first film was lost when I realized he was married to her. As soon as he was married to her, I went, oh, well, see, I was this close to supporting white people. I was this close. No.
Oh, so you were married to QAnon. Oh, okay.
Do you know what I mean? Total performative allyship. Oh yeah, you want to cross your fist over your chest, but who are you married to? Who are you in the bed with?
You saw that and said more. All the time, exclusively.
I apologize. My microphone just fell.
Fell. Is that like fell or
fell over on the desk? But I got it back into a workable position. So.
Listen, look, there's been so many things that you've said, David, that I've had to be an adult about. Like, you've been talking about your best scenes being when people were eating carrots. You have been talking about them getting the microphone into good positions. Like, everything you've said has been an innuendo.
There's definitely some homoeroticism going on today. I apologize.
I appreciate the consideration, but I'm always down for the gay. Don't worry.
Okay, good. That's good to know. I think we're at Chris's next dislike.
You're like, and next.
So this next one, I thought Ash went thematically dark, so I was in agreement. Did we really have to kill the Queen Mother? Did we really have to go there? So that a minor nitpick, dislike. That like Dave said, we're really grasping at straws here because I overall just really, really enjoyed the film, but I didn't like having to kill Mom.
And to a certain extent, I think that was just one of those things that thematically was necessary to really push Shuri into fully coming into her own, and enhance sort of that, like, her having to face, her emotions and that her need for vengeance and taking vengeance on somebody. I think thematically and from a storytelling perspective, it made sense. I just don't endorse anytime Angela Bassett gets removed from future appearances.
Yeah, very true. Stand up in the cinema and go, disagree. I totally agree with Dave. I think like it makes sense because they had to have somebody in the afterlife that she could talk to that was a positive influence. If you knew that you were going to have the Killmonger scene, you also need a counter. And then thematically, none of Letitia Wright's arc would have been possible if Ramonda was there to take the throne from her when she started to go left. Number one, her mum probably would have stopped her going so overcorrecting, to your point, Chris. So her mum would have been too much of a balancing force for Letitia Wright to have a compelling arc, because she would have, been the amazing support that she has been throughout the other movie and been like a balancing energy. And then also, should she have been like, no, I'm going to go and scratch up Namor's back, actually. Thanks. Then Ramonda could have just been like, all right, well, you know what? Sit f***ing down. I'll take the throne back. So that I think it would have introduced a whole different tension of like reasonable potential ruler versus grief-stricken reactionary potential ruler, and she had to go at that alone. So I do get it, but at the same time, like, and also she went out saving Riri, and I feel like when they did that, I was like, you bitch. Like they did it, and I was like, you f***ing bitch. Oh, sorry, can I swear here?
Oh, I have my little list for bleeps. You're all good.
Oh no, sorry.
No, you're fine.
But yes, I was like fiddlesticks.
I'll have to bleep those, right? Those fiddlesticks, they have to be bleeped.
But yeah, because they made her go out choosing to save Riri. So it puts the viewer in a position where either Ramonda's a hero or Riri dies. And there's no way that Ramonda would have seen that happening and not doing it. So you understood it, like you knew it. As soon as Riri started going down, I was like, oh, we're in a one or the other situation here. And so, yeah, I mean, it made sense. We managed to keep Riri as a character through it. So, you know, it wasn't just a trivial sort of offing, but it still stung. Yeah, totally.
All right, Ash, did you want to do more on that not having a third to it? Dave, what is your third and final dislike of the film?
You know, I think the scuttlebutt in the online nerd community is that much like the Hulk, Namor is sort of in a rights limbo with Universal holding the rights for a solo movie, and so we're probably not going to get a solo movie even of this version of the character. And so I think my big dislike here is just that I wanted more of this reinvention of the character, and particularly his civilization. You know, this is not the Atlantis of the comic books. And so I wanted to see more of Talokan. I wanted to see, more of the characters he surrounds himself with. I think we had sort of a lot of nameless, faceless, blue people, as his supporting cast. There weren't a lot of characters for him to bounce off of in his own kingdom, and for there to be like a really clear sense of how Talokan has developed since the people went into, underwater. And so I just wanted more of that civilization and how it functions, and have a greater variety of characters and stuff. This is the kind of stuff you would naturally get in a solo movie, but if we're never going to get a solo movie, I just wish there would have been a little more of it here.
And I'll go even just file an addendum because you hinted at it, but my final dislike is I wanted more development for Namora and Atuma. The biggest thing that you had for Atuma was him squaring off with Okoye, and that was just like warrior back and forth, so that was cool, but there wasn't really much depth.
I didn't even catch the guy's name.
Yeah,
like to the point, I didn't even know that his name was Atuma. Like I did not catch that in the movie. So you're right. There was just not enough development for non-Namor characters related to Talokan, I guess is the best way to put it.
And then Namora had that really one beautiful scene towards the end of the film. But then aside from that, you're exactly right. It was Namor and company, which I desperately wanted more.
They know how to run up on folks though, and there sure was a company.
Yeah,
at all times.
His line to Shuri, like I clutched my pearls, where he was just like, "Bury your dead, count your losses," and I was like, "Oh, it's like that."
Listen, every time, of course, it's like that. Every time he appeared, there were 50,000 motherfuckers on a whale.
That whale was working overtime.
Do you know what I mean? Do you know how many bombs they brought? When I saw that giant thing, I was like, "Oh my god, what is that?" And it was individual bombs.
Yeah,
I was like, these people are insane. They're not playing.
I saw somebody said this is the most insane water balloon fight I've ever seen.
Listen, I don't know who's making those bombs. I don't know what they're getting paid, but it felt like sweatshop conditions to me, because how many are in there? Like he told us, and that's this again. Do you know when you say like everything was so rich that you wanted more? I wanted to know so much, and this is to your point. I wanted to know so much more about the Talokan, like the society, like who are the warmongers, who are the weapon makers, like how did they train those whales? Where is all of this coming from? There was orcas at one point. I was like, incredible. And so it was like, you're right. They made them so rich that it feels like such a loss that we don't get to experience that richness.
Ooh, here's another one I totally forgot about. The sirens / mermaids, and how they were just walking off the edge of the ship. Oh my god.
Just in the water going, 21, can you do something for me? Can you talk to the ops next? They were incredible.
All right, so final verdict on the movie. Ash, if you had to give the sucker a grade, what are your thoughts?
What are we talking about? What's the...
Oh, wait. Do you guys do letter grades over there?
Yeah.
Like A, B's, and C's?
We do loads of stuff. Well, this wouldn't be that. What's a solid A like what's a solid A plus.
Yeah, you want to give it an A+? We can just go with that.
Yeah, because we don't really have that here. We do like numerical stuff more than anything.
That's what we did in Germany too. Yeah.
Yeah, only the Americans want to be confusing for no reason.
In everything, man. Let's just talk metric for a second. Like, God, can we just get on board with the metric system, please?
Jesus Christ! It's because they love misinformation.
It's what, yeah.
And if they make the grading vague, then they can be like, "Where's the greatest country in the world?" And you go USA, and they go A. And it's like how are we measuring any of this?
But yeah, A plus for the movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, same. I mean, like, it's a good movie when we had to really nitpick to find any dislikes.
Yeah, I don't think I'll give it the plus. I'll give it an A. But that CIA subplot just bothered the out of me. Like I'm gonna be honest, it really did. It was every time these white people showed up, I was like, just get rid of the white people in this movie. We do not need them. They're not required for the story. It's just not necessary.
As a card carrying advocate, an activist, I will say, how do you feel about rating down the black movie because of the white people? Let's discuss.
Would it be, but without joking for a second, would it be that difficult? Just say we're going to make a Black Panther movie and it doesn't actually involve white people. Like, can we just make a movie that's set in Wakanda and you don't have to have, Everett Ross show up? Like, is it really so necessary for Western civilization to have some crackers in their soup? Like, is that really necessary? I do not think so. I think it would have been a perfectly fine movie without that subplot.
Oh, well, I see you, but I think there's probably like, I fall back on that. I think there's contractual things.
That is probably my notion as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a certain amount of world building that every movie has to do as a matter of course. And there's probably some non-negotiable bullet points that get given to every director, which is your movie is where we launch this idea, or where we launch this character, or where we hint at this thing. And you can do that as big, you can do that, as you see fit, but this is what we need to see coming out of it.
All right, well, there you have it. A very spirited discussion on Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, among other things, apparently. Thank you so much for Ash from X of Words for joining us in our discussion, and be sure to check out the X of Words podcast if you are so inclined. Any final words, Ash?
No, thank you. Thank you for the invite. It's been a pleasure to talk to you for what feels like a long time. I mean, usually I do mine for about 12 minutes. So this is, I've been able to get into a level of depth that I rarely enjoy. So thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's been absolutely a blast. All right, folks, so stick around, because after a short break, Chris and I will be back with some nerd commendations. Chris is finally gaming again. What is he into? We'll find out. And we're back, folks, and it's time for the best segment, because we always save the best for last, of the Nerd Byword. You know it as... All right, Chris, what are you nerd commending this week to us?
Oh, man. So we have talked about this game quite a lot over the last year or so, since its initial announcement at DC Fandom in August of 2020. There was a lot of hubbub and criticism when it came to the gameplay trailer reveals. But, dude, I bought Gotham Knights on a digital sale in the Microsoft Store. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. There are a couple of nitpicks here and there. Red Hood traveling via mystic pits or mystic like portals and things of that nature. There's some silliness to it, but like I love everything about this game, and I'm willing to overlook like the little nitpicks like that. Robin's main costume, Tim Drake's main costume, is hideous. It's like a weird unbuttoned hoodie at the top, but thankfully that there's no shortage of customizable things when it comes to suits and weaponry for each character. And here's the hook, line, and sinker for me. The storyline is fascinating. If Batman dies, what happens next in the power vacuum that is left in Gotham in his absence? And then his four of his many proteges try to step in and put things back together. It's also fascinating from a storytelling perspective to see Alfred. I think that's been one of my favorite things to see, as Alfred, who is an elderly individual who is Bruce's caretaker. It's almost like burying a child. So that's a fascinating aspect to unpack. There are a lot of cheeseball type of emotional beats and little clips here, interactions between the characters, but it's fine. I'm here for it. The gameplay is pretty similar to the other like Arkham games, but this game single-handedly has transformed my allegiances, and now I am absolutely obsessed with everything surrounding Dick Grayson. I'm reading all of his comics. Based on this game alone, I spent $99 on an Ultra subscription to DC Universe Infinite so I could read Nightwing comics. I love Dick Grayson. I can totally relate to him as like this eldest child who feels the weight of the world on his shoulders, being the first Robin. He feels so responsible, like he should take up everything, and this is all on him in the absence of Bruce. And then being able to kind of like decompartmentalize all of that and trust in his siblings or fellow proteges. Red Hood is not one of my favorite compelling characters, but I like that he's juxtaposed against characters like Dick, like Babs, like Tim. Tim is this lovable little nerd. He's a fascinating character to play with too. There's just endless possibilities with this game, and it makes it like endless fun for me.
So tell me a little bit about the gameplay. I mean, I know you talked about like the story and the characters, but what does the gameplay actually feel like on this one? Because I was a little weirded out by some of the stuff I saw in the early gameplay footage. How does it play?
I think it plays really well. I think, like I said, it's very similar to the other Arkham games. Without being some of the Arkham stuff was super overcomplicated. I'm looking at you, Arkham Knights. I really did not like that game. Or Arkham Knight, was that the one where whatever that one was? I did not like it. But it's pretty simple and straightforward. There are like momentum abilities that you build up by like combo attacks and evading and dodging, and then it's also pretty unique to each character. Dick's fighting style is very much acrobatic. Tim's is very tech based. Babs is very she's probably the closest to Batman's fighting style. And then of course have Red Hood, who's this big bruiser type, go in guns blazing. So it's really unique to each character, and you can change the characters as much as you want to. So you kind of it's really wide open too, because you can follow the main storyline or whatever, or you can just go on patrol and just collect clues. It's what I really love about it too is like the detective base at its core that we saw in that first Arkham game was really, really cool, and it's present here. So I love everything about it. I don't really have a lot of criticisms of it, and I'm pleasantly surprised by it.
That sounds to me like I'm going to have to give this one a shot then.
All right, Dave, what is your nerd commendation for this week?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go into the realm of movies for a second, which I haven't done in a hot second, because I really don't have a whole lot of time to actually watch movies, but I was able to squeeze one in. And that is The Black Phone. The Black Phone is a 2021 American coming-of-age supernatural horror film. It was directed by Scott Derrickson. Derrickson also had his hand in co-writing the movie. It is an adaptation, actually, of a short story by Joe Hill. Now, for those of you who listen to the Byword regularly, you might have noticed I've been on a bit of a Joe Hill bender, reading some of his comic books as well over at DC's Hill House. I'm also in the process of reading Lock and Key right now from IDW, so I'm kind of on a Joe Hill bender. For those of you that don't know, Hill is the son of prolific horror author Stephen King, and he appears to have some of the same proclivities as far as the things he likes to write about. The plot of The Black Phone is pretty straightforward. It's 1978. There is a serial child abductor on the loose. He is named the Grabber by the media. And one of the main characters, a boy by the name of Finney, he's 13 years old, ends up being grabbed. And he is locked into this basement by the killer, who is played expertly by Ethan Hawke, and there is a phone in this basement, that an old school, not a cell phone, guys, like an old school landline, but the line is cut, the phone doesn't work for years already, yet Finney, for some reason, is able to receive phone calls on this phone from the killer's previous victims, like ghostly voices. And these previous victims, some of which he knew from school, are trying to give him tips and guide him in surviving this endeavor. At the same time, Finney's sister, Gwen, who is concerned for her brother and who has inherited some kind of sixth sense from her deceased mother, is trying to use her powers to help find her brother. The movie's, perfectly creepy. It has a little bit of that It vibe, I guess. The most recent adaptation of It, also has a little bit of that sort of Stranger Things thing where it's set in the past, in this case 1978. But I think, unlike Stranger Things, which has a tendency of kind of rubbing your face into cultural 1980s touchstones like New Coke and stuff like that, this setting is much more subdued and I would say realistic. It's not this heightened 1980s situation that we get from Stranger Things. It's very, I think, probably a little bit more honest, if that's the word I'm looking for. The movie's perfectly creepy. It also has, the really cool, child trying to come into his own kind of storyline and finding his power. The ending of the movie is immensely satisfying, which is pretty unusual for these kinds of movies. I'm looking at you, Stephen King, who has always horrible things happening to the main cast before the ending arrives. This is a much more positive ending in some ways, I guess I would say. And the adaptation is really pitch perfect. I like the story to begin with, but the movie does a really good job of expanding some of the ideas in the short story. So I thought the movie was just a tremendous good time, and comes highly recommended, Chris.
All right, believe it or not, I'm thoroughly intrigued on this one because of exactly what you said. The it factor, pun fully intended, because I really, really enjoyed that film and the camaraderie and the coming of age elements of it. I'm also equally intrigued simply because of Ethan Hawke's involvement and what he was able to do in Moon Knight as the main adversary. I thought was a really, really interesting portrayal and something I haven't seen a lot of his work in recent years. So seeing him portray this creepy adversary was really fascinating. And now to see him go straight, lean into a villain is a high selling point for me.
Yeah, and he does a fantastic job in this movie. The cast, generally speaking, is really, really good in this, especially the child actors as well. So I know that Gwen in particular left a real impression on me in this movie, and I hope to see this child actress popping up in other things. Just a very, very cool little movie, and definitely worth watching. Alrighty, folks, that's it for another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. If you like what you just heard, then please get on your favorite podcasting platform, give us a rating, a review, and subscribe so you never miss another episode. We are available on every podcasting platform you can imagine, and if we are not on your favorite podcasting platform, then find us on social media and let us know, and we will make sure that we remedy that situation for you.
And you can find us on said social media platforms as it stands right now on Twitter and Instagram at Nerd Byword, individually That Nerd Dave and That Nerd Chris. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez, with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.